Hi everyone, I'm Sandra Weingarten, a member of the Eugene Symphony Guild Board, and very pleased to welcome you to this concert preview for our last in the season's Soundwaves concert series. The Symphony Guild is proud to sponsor these concert previews and support the symphony in many other ways. For example, sponsoring the Young Artist Competition, which recently concluded with some amazing young performances from our winners. Of course, our largest way of supporting the symphony is through our fundraising, which we've been doing for over 50 years. Currently, our largest fundraiser, Music in the Garden, has been done for over 20 years. Now, we've done it as a personally guided tour of 6 gardens every year, but however, due to COVID precautions this year, we've had to do it virtually. It's currently in production and we're very excited about the process. We have 6 magnificent gardens, and as we get them filmed and edited, we are premiering our virtual Music in the Garden on June 27th. And I'm sure you'll be hearing and reading the publicity about this as we get closer. In the meantime, we'd love to hear about your garden stories. If you have a garden story, please share it with us, and you can help us in producing our virtual Music in the Garden. Just make a very short 1 minute or less video of your garden or special aspect of your garden and share it with us. Information on how to do this is on our website, eugenesymphonyguild.org. And we hope that we will see you, or that you will see us, on June 27th when Music in the Garden premieres. And now I'd like to introduce our maestro, Francesco Lecce-Chong, who will tell us about this upcoming Soundwaves concert.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Eugene Symphony Guild concert preview. As always, thank you so much to the Eugene Symphony Guild for supporting these pre-concert talks. And this is actually our last one this season to close out our Soundwaves series. Obviously, hoping that this is the last one in other ways, as in the last one that I have to give from my office, and hoping that we can all be in person again when we start next season. So keeping a lot of optimism as we look forward. Things change every day, but it's feeling like we're moving in a good direction, and certainly just generally kind of looking out in the orchestra field, there seems to be a lot of momentum and a lot of planning as far as being able to return to concert halls with our full orchestra and an audience. I mean, my goodness, it's been so long. It's almost hard to remember. It feels like a distant memory. Having having an audience and having the full concert experience. When I think back kind of early on in this process, I guess there was the novelty around getting to record and getting to kind of finesse things, through video and audio recording. And that was great, maybe the first couple months. But I'm definitely reaching a point where there is something incredibly special about just having that moment of performance where there's no going back, right? You're only moving forward, you have your audience there, and that particular moment, even if it's recorded, will never quite be the same as everyone who was in that hall. And I think that feeling is unlike anything else, and I've certainly missed that. So looking forward to getting back to that. Allow me to apologize, by the way, for my completely bare office. I recently moved and have had no time to start putting things away. So, looking forward to making things a little less sparse in here. But thanks for hanging with me through that. And we should probably get into this program, because there is a lot going on in this final Soundwaves concert in typical Eugene Symphony fashion. We've got a lot of moving parts, a lot of interesting music, and featuring some of the most innovative music that's been written kind of over the past 50 years especially. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. The order of the program we designed to kind of take you on a specific musical journey, but in talking about the program, it's a little easier to kind of group things. So just be aware this won't actually be the order of the recorded concert. But I kind of wanted to start with the two works by Chinese American composers, Zhou Tian and Chen Yi. Two just absolutely incredible composers, two of my favorite ones working today. Always enjoy getting to kind of keep track of what they're writing right now and what they've been doing. And these are actually kind of earlier works by both of them, but I think they're absolutely spectacular and really highlight how special they both are to the music scene right now. So we're opening this program with a piece by Zhou Tian called Nocturne. And Zhou was born in 1981 in Hangzhou, China, and then came to the U.S. to study at the Curtis Institute of Music, which is my alma mater. I didn't actually get to know him when I was at Curtis. It's actually been quite recent. A few years back, he had a work of his that was commissioned by the Cincinnati Symphony, this massive concerto for orchestra. Was nominated for a Grammy Award. And I always like to keep track of, especially if I don't know some of the new pieces that have been nominated, I always try to make a point to go listen. And this one, it just really stuck out to me because there just aren't too many, large scale 30-minute orchestral works being composed these days. That's kind of why, for instance, we have the first symphony project going on with the Eugene Symphony, is to try to encourage composers to take these bigger risks and our orchestra and our audience to be in this together. At any rate, this concerto for orchestra he wrote just really caught my imagination. And while I haven't had a chance to conduct that, or actually, I think this is going to be my first chance to conduct a piece by him. So I've been enjoying his music so much, and really glad that I was able to include him on this program. The Nocturne is an earlier work of his. I think it's from around 2003. And this is a work for string orchestra, but it was arranged from a movement from his first string quartet. But I think you'll get a sense for just the craftsmanship of this piece. That's what it is for me. I mean, of course, it's an absolute gorgeous piece, perhaps in the vein of Barber Adagio for strings, but that really doesn't do it justice because it really is a different piece. But it has some of that deep-seated romanticism in it for sure. But there's something about his lyricism that is incredible. I mean, he really lets the instruments sing. There's so much detail in the inner voices, the harmonies, the way they change, and then the overall even structure of this nocturne. It's a much more linear piece than you might expect. It kind of always travels forward. He's not always looking back. It just everything about this piece really kind of stands out to me, and given especially just kind of how simple and beautiful this work is. And that's kind of the sense I get from him as a composer, is that there is this natural musicality to what he does. It immediately invites you into his sound world. It's warm, it's lyrical, it's just remarkable. But then there's something fresh and new, and the detail and the craftsmanship is there to carry his works. So I'm really glad that we'll start off with that piece. And then I believe opening the second half will be the piece by Chen Yi, Shuo. Now, so Chen is really quite an established name now, especially in American music. But her story, if you ever want to read one of the most incredible composer stories, it's well worth getting to know her better. She, in particular, has an incredible way of bridging, Chinese folk music and kind of the American contemporary scene and the orchestral literature. It feels cliche to say that she combines kind of Eastern and Western cultures, but in her music, she does it in a really organic and remarkable way in so much of her music. Just to give you a little bit of a tidbit of her background, but there's a lot more detail that I'm leaving out. But she grew up through the Cultural Revolution in China, and ended up getting sent to the labor camps. And the one thing she brought with her was her violin, and she didn't have any music. That was all taken away from her. She didn't have a teacher. There was no way to study. But while she was in these labor camps, she would listen to the folk songs that people were singing. And she would teach them to herself on the violin and basically kind of try to keep up her own musical studies until that, whole kind of, horrific time was over. So just incredible resilience, and then to kind of go from there and come study in the U.S. and be one of the I think she was the first woman to get a graduate degree from, I think it was the Beijing Conservatory of Music. It's just remarkable, her whole story, and now it's one of the most famous composers in the world, and keeping that background, that deep understanding of the kind of the core of Chinese folk music, songs and dances, but then obviously embracing the full orchestra, Western instruments, and finding ways to bring all that together, I think is incredible. And she does it in such a brilliant way. And Shuo is such a perfect example of this. Definitely based on some Chinese folk dances, and it has, it feels like a piece that absolutely is meant to be played on these Western instruments. It's the sounds, the rich sounds that she gets, the way she uses the string instruments, but at the same time, the music has this edge to it. Obviously, it's not inspired by these instruments. It's more these, our string instruments kind of taking on this music. And it's really incredible to kind of see this all come to light. This piece is very exciting. A lot of, it starts off with this big free giant viola solo and then goes through kind of a series of dances. I think you're really going to enjoy this and get a sense for her kind of unique style. This is also really exciting for us because I am not conducting this piece. It is our conducting fellow, Daniel Cho. Daniel's been working with the orchestra and me for about the past 3 seasons. He's currently a master's student at the University of Oregon. And he's done such incredible work for us. Obviously, when we're normally functioning in the hall with the full orchestra, he's at all my rehearsals, so that we can talk about balance. How he's my ears in the hall, and he has such a good ear, and we can really talk about everything from like interpretation to balances, and it's just been great to have that support and those ideas, and he just soaks up everything that's going on around him, and just a remarkable musician overall. So during this process, during this season, obviously I haven't needed to have ears in the hall. And in fact, what he's been doing is behind the scenes, he's pretty much been our director. When you are doing video of an orchestra, you can't just show whatever you want. In fact, it's incredibly difficult to finesse every single shot that you see. Make sure you're seeing important instruments that are playing, but there's always something going on in the orchestra. And so ultimately what you really need is a conductor to call the shots in a performance, to be able to capture things live. There's hardly any editing that goes on after. You have to get the shots, in the moment. And so Daniel has done such a great job taking this on, and has really made our Soundwave series possible. So all that is to say, this is a well-deserved opportunity. We're really, the musicians in the orchestra have really enjoyed working with Daniel, and he did a wonderful job preparing this piece. So excited to have that opportunity. And once again, I think it's perfect for the Eugene Symphony, an orchestra that has launched the careers of so many young conductors. And I think, this is kind of the next level, which is, having a conducting fellow have an opportunity with our orchestra is really fantastic. So we have those 2 Chinese-American composers on this program. And then I wanted to move on to the piece that's going to finish the program. This is probably the one like really famous piece on this program. It's the Fantasia on theme by Thomas Tallis. This is a work by Ralph Vaughan Williams, the wonderful English composer. This piece was written in 1910, and of course it's based on themes by Thomas Tallis, who was a 16th century English composer. So think essentially kind of English Renaissance. And I mean, this piece is so beloved. I mean, it's been performed and recorded so many times. And I guess during the week that I was working on this with the Eugene Symphony, I was trying to think, why is this piece, perhaps one of the most beloved works for strings ever? What really makes it stand out? And I think there's a couple things. One of the most obvious ones that might strike you in this performance is breaking down the string section into multiple sections. So that there's 3 sections in this piece. There's a string quartet, so 4 players, the principals, and then you have orchestra 1, which is pretty much most of the string section, and then you have orchestra 2, which is a few players in the back of each section. So there's basically 3 sections, and what Vaughan Williams does with that is basically creates this antiphonal style, which would have been very appropriate for the Renaissance. And so these chorales, these beautiful melodies get passed around. Sometimes played by single instruments like the string quartet, sometimes played by like the rich orchestra 1, and then this more kind of like off in the distance orchestra 2. It's really remarkable how he divided the strings, but makes sure that we hear them very separately. The timbres of each section is very different. He didn't just divide the orchestra in half. You hear each section individually, and ultimately, it creates such a rich sound. I gotta say, this is one of the most fun pieces to conduct because ultimately you just get to kind of bathe in the warmth of this piece, and I think ultimately, I mean, Vaughan Williams just did this better than anybody else. The way he chooses to set these themes and the way the orchestra is laid out, I think the thing that you can listen to as well is the range that he uses. So he'll use the basses at their lowest register and some of the violins at their top register. But remember, instead of having 5 sections in the orchestra, right? So first violin, second violin, viola, cello, basses, he can triple that, right? Because you have quartet, and then you have the orchestra 1 and you have orchestra 2. All of them can be playing different parts. So he can stack the registers really, really wide and fill it all in as well. And ultimately, that kind of breadth of sound, even from the first chord, is stunning. You just don't you don't hear the string orchestra sounding like this a lot. So I think it's just a remarkable piece, and and I think it's a great way to finish our Soundwaves series. There's so much warmth around it, and a reminder and a promise of just how incredible hearing live music in the hall is. Because this is definitely one of those pieces that will, as beautiful as it's going to be in recording, it's going to leave you wanting that chance to hear it live in the hall. So that'll finish our program, and then I want to finish today talking about kind of the 2 more avant-garde American works that are going to be on this program by John Cage and Terry Riley. So I'm excited we get to also feature some extra instruments finally outside of our string section. For the John Cage, this piece, Second Construction from 1940, features a percussion quartet, actually. Now, John Cage is kind of in some ways a poster child for avant-garde music, American avant-garde music, especially middle of the 20th century. It's basically a lot of extremes, right? I mean, I always say the best way to understand John Cage is his 2 extremes, which is, one is a piece called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, and it's empty. Like if you open up the music, there's nothing there, and the idea is, you can kind of decide what the idea is, but basically musicians will just sit there for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, and the piece is silence, or whatever you hear during those 4 minutes and 33 seconds. So that gives you a sense on like that side of like pushing the boundaries of what is a piece of music, even like what is sound, what counts as a performance, right? So you have that. And then on the other extreme is a piece for organ that he had titled As Slow as Possible. And this piece is currently being performed in a town in Germany. And it's going to take over 500 years to play this piece. And the notes change, like the note can change every like couple months. And it's in this organ, and they have little sandbags, and it's like an event. Like you can travel there for the changing of the note. And anyways, in another 500 years, the piece will finish. So, John Cage was, he was always out there and pushing the boundaries, and it's important to have composers like him. It might not be everybody's cup of tea. You're not going to hear his music played by orchestras, probably hardly at all these days, but he had such an influence on just kind of the philosophy around music and allowing composers to kind of push the boundaries. Because if he went that far, there's a lot of room in between. And ultimately, a second construction for me is one of his best works as far as like kind of in between. It's a piece that's I think it's really easily digestible. It's super fun. I mean, you're getting to see all these different percussion techniques, all these different instruments that they're playing. The way we've videoed this, you're really going to get to see some of these incredible techniques up close. This piece is going to be over before you want it to be over. Like, there's so much going on, and it's also groovy. This is a piece that finds these really fun rhythmic grooves and play back and forth between different instruments. I think it's a terrifically fun piece. And while it certainly is John Cage, exploring and pushing the boundaries of sound, I think this is probably his most relatable and fun work. And there's something for everybody to kind of latch onto, whether it's visually or acoustically. So I think you'll really enjoy this piece and be really impressed by what our percussion quartet put together for this. And then we're going to finish with Terry Riley's In C, a piece from 1964. Terry Riley is part of the minimalist movement in the US, including composers like Philip Glass and Steve Reich. We could talk about minimalism for forever. I think it's a fascinating area because of how minimalism grew and influenced and changed, and is still very much a part of the contemporary music scene right now in the US. At the same time, In C is, I think, perhaps the most pure piece of minimalist music, because over time minimalism has become a technique, but is not like just a style, like a pure style, and ultimately it's basically how can you use the smallest and simplest figurations. What are the smallest building blocks of construction that you can use to make music, and how can you use them in interesting ways? And it's just better to sometimes show than tell. But ultimately, the idea, for me at least, acoustically, this may not be the philosophical thing behind minimalism, but acoustically, it's the idea that if you repeat a figure over and over and over and over and over and over, and then very slowly alter aspects of that figure, our ear doesn't always pick up on when that change happened. And so slowly over time, a figure can become a completely different figure, and we don't know the moment that our ear hears the change. And I think that's one of the really fun things about minimalist pieces, especially pure minimalist pieces, is you just get to sit back, and it's almost like a magic show, an acoustic magic show, as far as how things are changing. So let's dig into what Terry Riley is doing in C, and why I think this is kind of the most pure version of minimalism. Part of it is he wrote it so that anyone can do this. Any number of instruments, any instruments. It can be any length of time between 30 minutes to several hours. It's an open-ended piece that embraces the simplicity of minimalism, and he writes it in a way so that no matter how it sounds, it's a minimalist piece, even though of course there's elements of randomness to it, much like the Guthnetotir piece that we played last month in our Soundwaves series. So I want to bring up the music because honestly this is the best way to talk about this. So let's see, here we are. So this is what the music looks like. As you can see, it is 53 fragments of music, and each one is separated. Let's see if I can draw here. There we go. Yeah, so each one is separated, right? So you have figure 1, then you have figure 2. Okay, and so he's created a series of 53 fragments, and you can see some of them are like one note. Like, look at this one here, just one note. And then you have this really long one down here. There's only this long one right here. All right, there we go. And that one takes up a whole line, right? But most of them are pretty short, as you can tell. And the idea is there's basic, in C, is because there is one percussion instrument, a piano, or in our case, a xylophone, where it's just steady eighth notes on C, an octave on C, that is played the entire piece, that comes in and out of the texture, but it helps the random group of players be able to stay together. And by stay together, I mean, be able to play their fragments in the same tempo as each other, not necessarily at the same time. So if you look at it, the directions, there's a lot of directions around it, but the basic idea is a whole group of musicians come together, and without any pre-planning or discussion, everyone starts at figure 1. And you can only move forward. So whenever you've ever had your time playing figure 1, you can move on to figure 2. And you play figure 2 for a while. You just repeat it over and over and over and over and over. And when you're done with figure 2, you can move on to figure 3. And so on and so forth. And the idea is that everyone can move whenever they want to, but you are supposed to listen to each other and try to stay within the general vicinity. So maybe within 2 or 3 figures of each other. And so because of that, you can sort of drop in and out. And as that happens, here's the amazing thing, is as musicians, we feel momentum in music. And this piece has a way of creating its own momentum. It's different every time, but you'll hear things where we'll end up making swells in this performance, and we'll drop down for times it'll be really, really soft. And there's a lot of different characters in this piece, believe it or not. It has its own structure because of the way that Riley has created this piece. So even though there's a lot of openness as far as how it can be played and how long it will take, because you have to move in order and because you need to sort of stay in the realm of where other people are around you, the piece progresses through different feelings and different textures and different sounds. But it does so imperceptibly. And that's what's really fascinating. Let me see if I can... Let's see if I got my piano on here. Yeah. So, like the first one, the first figure, right? You're just repeating it over and over and over. And then, the second one is... Right? And so you can see that those are pretty close to each other. You're going to end up with if you play them at the same time, you get... Right? You would just get the same thing, basically. So the idea is, what he's created is that for a while, everyone's going to do this. And then finally, someone's going to move on to 2. Right? And then more people will move on to it. And it won't always happen at the same time. But then you can see, in number 3, the notes are still the same, Right? And then when you move on to 4, as one person moves on to 4, suddenly you're going to start hearing an extra note. You see that? So, as people move on to the figures, the piece is slowly morphing And it's truly an incredible piece, but I also just love the fun aspect of this piece. It's a challenge in many ways. Each musician is on your own. You're trying to figure out what people are doing around you. You're trying to react to it, but you're also planning your own moments in this piece. So I think it's terrifically fun. I've actually never had a chance to be a part of a performance of this piece, so I get to play a little bit on the piano as well. Obviously, you don't need a conductor in a piece like this. So we had a great time putting this together. And one of the other really nice aspects of this piece is I really wanted to have a chance to include more than our string section on this final program. And so what we were able to do is record some of our wind and brass players individually playing these fragments, and then we're going to splice that into the performance. And so even amongst the live performance you're going to hear, you'll get to also see and hear some of our wind and brass players come in and out of the texture and kind of join in with us, even though it couldn't be right in that particular moment. And even on top of that, we're also going to kind of take you on a journey through Eugene. This is going to be a little bit of a celebration of our city for this final program. We love bringing the community into our performances as much as possible. And in this particular instance, we're going to take a journey through these incredible murals that are all over the city. And the very interesting kind of video footage and photography of these murals, and it'll blend in and out of this performance. And I think it actually goes really, really well with a piece like this, where there's so much kind of forward momentum and things are slowly morphing, and there's an openness, there's a sense of fun, and always that kind of sense of community, because truly anyone could pick up an instrument or sing and join in a performance of this piece. So I think there's, as avant-garde and odd as this piece is written and so innovative, it's also just like a fun piece that any group of people could basically gather together and have a performance of it for fun. So I think it's great to be able to include on this last program. And as I said, one of the silver linings, as much as I'm looking forward to just getting back into the concert hall with actual concerts with an audience, this is the sort of piece that you probably wouldn't ever put on like in a typical concert, especially with an entire orchestra. And so, again, one of the silver linings for me throughout this season has been the opportunity to dig into some repertoire and present some repertoire that I might not have otherwise had the chance, and just bring something a little different and make use of the technology, make use of how we're having to present these performances and do pieces that I think work really well in this format. So thank you all so much for joining us throughout this season for the Soundwave series. It's been an incredible and important step for our organization, because yes, we want to get back in the concert hall with our audience, but also we've reached people far beyond the borders of our community and reached more people in our community through these virtual performances. And it's an important part of what we do now. And I don't think that's going to go away. And if anything, it's probably long overdue that orchestras in general embraced a more digital format, as well as, obviously the in-person ways of connecting. And so, having this experience, developing the skills, developing the comfort level with presenting concerts this way will significantly help us as we move forward and think about growing our organization, meeting the needs of more people, and just connecting more with the outside musical world. I envision that there are some incredible years ahead of us now, where orchestras will be able to more freely share musical ideas and information and performances with each other. That just hasn't been possible. There just hasn't been a reason to kind of push us in that direction, even though, in my opinion, we should have quite a while ago. Here we are. We're now in that world, and it's not going to go away. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's ahead. And so we so appreciate you being a part of this and helping us take this step this season. And we've got an incredible set of concerts coming next season. We're putting it together right now, and I think we have really bright future, ahead of us. So thank you so much. Thank you, as always, to everyone in the Eugene Symphony family that has made this series possible, that has stuck with us, and can't wait to see you all again in person back in the Holt Center soon. So please enjoy this performance, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.